So as we begin, this is our curriculum preview, part 2. So if you attended the curriculum preview last week, that was part 1, and that was an overview, but today is a deeper dive, and this is specifically geared toward middle school. Please note in this presentation, especially because in middle school, we're departmentalized and our teachers are typically not teaching both math and ELA, that the first half of this presentation, the first 30 minutes will be ELA, and the second half will be math. So if you're a math teacher and you want to tune in a little later, you're welcome to come back or you're welcome to stay along. Our purpose for today is to highlight the implementation plan, to understand the vision for both the ELA and math blocks, to dig into the components of the lesson. We're going to look at what other supports are there to support our English language learners, as well as our students with disabilities, because we're getting a lot of questions regarding that. And then we'll have Q&A. Before we even go into the implementation plan, I want to make sure that I introduce our teams here. Joining me on the curriculum instruction front is first we have Ebony Massey, our coordinator for ELA, who will kick us off when we do the ELA portion, and she'll introduce the C&I team joining her, as well as our guest from EL Education. In addition, we have Cassandra Bell. She's our coordinator for mathematics. She'll introduce her math team that's on the call when we get to the math portion, as well as introductions for our Great Minds, Eureka Math partners that are also on the call. So let's get into the implementation plan. Next slide, please. So right now we're in phase 1. Phase 1 are all the curriculum previews that we've had, part 1 last week, part 2 this week, principal meetings throughout last week and this week. We've been having community engagements with parents. We have a parent preview geared directly to parents tonight in both in English and Spanish, as well as we've been meeting with the communities and different schools. So going to faculty meetings, school PTA meetings, etc. So phase 1 is really our community engagement. Phase 2, though, is when we really get into the learning. So based on adoption and approval from the school board on June 1st, we will kick off phase 2, which will include virtual learning opportunities for both in ELA and in math that are both asynchronous and synchronous and can begin as early as June. We'll have monthly coaches meeting, principal trainings. We'll be doing some strategic planning with our partners to make sure we're all aligned and we're providing the right supports for our leaders, our teachers, our students. We'll also get into ordering materials and receiving materials, so we are ensuring that our teachers have those prior to their training. This is a glimpse of what our Eureka virtual training will look like. You'll notice that these are organized by the role, a principal, a coach, a teacher. But please note, it looks like principals would only have 2 sessions of learning. These are just the ones that are geared directly toward principals. Principals will be also joining in our focus on fluency and our major work of the grade PD, and can even join us on the video, the Teach Eureka video series sessions. For EL Education, again, the same idea. We have these are the 3 roles, but our principals will be engaging also in the K-8 Essentials, and if they're an elementary principal, those K-2 Essential workshops. And then phase 3 is the ongoing support. By no means do we want to launch this, learn curriculum, have this deep dive this summer, and then when we actually have students be like, you're on your own, good luck. Our intention is that there needs to be ongoing support, and not just this first year, but throughout the implementation and the sustainability, so we can ensure that we're learning and growing together with this curricula that best supports our students. So that will look like ongoing professional learning through our district-wide professional learning days, coaches trainings, cluster meetings with principals, master classes, learning walks, coaches cycles, strategic planning sessions with our partner. We want to hear from teachers, from students, and from principals every step of the way to make sure we're providing the best support for this learning around ELA and math. So that's a quick snapshot of our implementation plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Ebony Massey, who will introduce the literacy team and the EL education team, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into the curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Neighbors. Ebony Massey here, and I am very, very excited to know that we have Garen J. Richardson with us today. She is our secondary reading specialist for RPS. And we also have Ginger Camrith, who is our EL representative presenting today. And I'm so excited to have you both with us, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Great, thank you very much. Well, I just wanted to thank you so much for inviting Open Up and EL Education to be here with you today. Our two organizations are really excited to be partnering to bring EL Education to Richmond Public Schools. We try to be deeply supportive of students, of teachers, and of school leaders. And two of our most recent large district partnerships are with Detroit Public Schools and Hamilton County Schools in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And so we're really thrilled to be hopefully having Richmond Public Schools join our family. My name is Ginger Camrath. I am the K-12 Customer Success Manager at Open Up Resources. And as a Virginia girl, I am really excited to have the privilege of supporting Richmond through this adoption should everything move forward as we are hoping. The next slide, please. So EL Education is fiercely committed to supporting the development of the entire student. And as such, they have incorporated this expanded view of achievement into the curriculum. As educators, we care deeply about the standards and our students' ability to meet them. This is why this curriculum explicitly teaches and formally assesses all college and career-ready standards. As adults, though, we know our students need more than just a mastery of skill and a mastery of knowledge to truly measure their success in school. And so with this curriculum, a premium is also placed on building strong habits of character and focusing on the notion of high quality work. We believe, as you do, that our students are far more than just test scores, and we believe that the curriculum materials have an obligation to help students fully develop as people. With this curriculum, your students will grapple on how to take ownership of their learning, as well as develop rich content knowledge and meet the standards. While doing this work, they are working to understand how to take all of these skills and these habits outside of the classroom. So learning how to collaborate and persevere and effectively communicate with perspectives other than their own. Next slide, please. There are practices built into the curriculum that help teachers ensure that all voices in their classroom are heard. Protocols, total participation techniques, and engagement strategies work to make every student in your classroom feel valued. With this curriculum, your students are active learners and they have agency in their own education. They are becoming leaders of their own learning, even in the earliest of grades. And so students learn from one another and they're learning to respect one another in new ways. And their differences are truly being appreciated and celebrated in the classroom. The next slide, please. The Read, Think, Talk, Write cycle is a hallmark feature of the EL Education curriculum. And this is something that your teachers and your students will feel as a difference right out of the gate. It is part of nearly every lesson, but it isn't necessarily a step-by-step process that looks the same from lesson to lesson. This model gives students an opportunity to synthesize evidence, to play with ideas, to develop arguments, and rehearse various forms of communication during their lesson. The main tenet of this philosophy is that when students interact with the text in dynamic and collaborative ways, they comprehend that text more deeply and they can communicate the learning from that text more effectively. We firmly believe that text holds power. So for this reason, the curriculum requires every student to have his or her own copy of the central text in hand for much of the learning. The lessons revolve around the text and they always include opportunities and specific supports. So students can read the text or part of a text. They can think about it with compelling and higher order questions. They can talk about it with their peers, and then they can write about it in response to questions using evidence from the text to support their thinking. So with this approach, you won't see so much of a novel study, but rather the practice of using a novel as a catalyst for the learning and for the development of their skills. Next slide, please. Our curriculum is a comprehensive K-8 ELA curriculum. We're going to jump right into the middle school program, but I wanted you to see that students in younger grades will be experiencing the same curriculum and in a way that prepares them for the structure, the routines, and the components of the curriculum in middle school. So when you get those rising middle school students, they've already experienced a significant amount of what this EL structure looks like, and they come prepared for success. Next slide, please. The 6-8 curriculum is comprised of 45 minutes of daily instruction, and these are called the module lessons. The module lesson is the place where your students will build their literacy and comprehension skills and their knowledge of the world as they engage with those high quality complex text over a range of topics. With the module lessons, this is where teachers will be doing their read alouds and their think alouds. There are structured protocols for reading, writing, speaking, listening, and thinking. And this is where your students are not only reading complex text, but they're also writing about them. And so the nice thing about this curriculum is that the reading and the writing are intimately connected. We know that this is going to make that learning much more fruitful for students. When taught with fidelity, the curriculum hits all of the Common Core state standards. Additionally, the curriculum includes all of the materials teachers need to meet the standards in their classroom. And this includes assessments, remediation materials, scaffolds and supports, and enrichment activities. Next slide, please.
All right, thank you, Ginger. Good morning, everyone. This is Garen J. Richardson, and this slide speaks to the middle school literacy block, both for this school year, 1920 school year, and our proposed 2021 school year. So if we look at the 1920 school year literacy block, many of the middle school teachers who were on the call, you'll remember that we were always talking about the learning objective, and that is what the students need to know and be able to do as a result of the lesson. And so we wanted all teachers to identify the learning objective at the top of every course, just to let the students know what to expect as the class continues. And then we moved into direct instruction. This was how the teacher presented the concepts or skills to the students. And then we moved into guided instruction, and these were activities that the students would complete with the teacher's guidance. After the guided instruction or guided practice, there was an opportunity always for a formative assessment if we desired to implement one. And then we moved into independent practice, and this is activities that the students completed to reinforce the concepts and skills they developed in the lesson. You also had an opportunity for a formative assessment after the independent practice as well. And we went into the closure. And this is where the teacher assisted the students in organizing all of the information that they gained during the lesson. And of course, we spoke of formative assessments, checks for understandings, and then summative assessments. We on the district level, we implemented unit assessments as our summative, but many of you all also had summative assessments that you administered in your own classrooms. We had AIR, which was independent reading. Accountable independent reading is the acronym for AIR, but we just called it independent reading this school year. And we asked that teachers allow students to read independently for 10 minutes this year, but we didn't say where in the class block it would go, as long as they just read for 10 minutes independently. We spoke of, and we had PD on annotating and close reading, and of course, authentic anchor text. All of our anchor texts were authentic texts. The proposed 2021 literacy block, if you look at it, it has some similarities. You have the opening, then the work time, and the closing, and embedded you would have assessments and homework. For their assessments, you have check for understanding strategies, mid-unit assessments, and end-of-unit assessments. Those kind of will be familiar to some of us. And then the practices would be our module lessons, anchor text, AIR, accountable independent reading, habits of character, close reading, and anchor charts. So I feel like many of the middle school teachers, if you are on the line, some of these 2021 proposed expectations you'll be quite familiar with because we saw many of them during this current school year.
And this is just a slide or a visual of what the proposed 6th through 8th grade literacy block could look like, to include the AIR, opening, work time, and then the closing and assessment.
Okay, great. So now we'll start talking about the structure of this curriculum and what it looks like on a yearly basis and a daily basis. In every grade, there are 4 modules per year. Again, that's K through 8, so you're keeping that consistency. The 4 modules allow students to build important content knowledge over a topic related to science or social studies or literature. Each module will use those rich, authentic trade books throughout, and they include both a combination of informational and literary text. Each module is about 8 to 9 weeks of instruction, and these fit within the quarter of your school year. And then independently, each of those modules is further broken down into 3 units, and each of those units will build upon one another and build upon the learning. That first unit is all about building background and content knowledge. So exposing your students to lots of information, reading a lot about the topic of the module. Unit 1 is really about leveling the playing field in your classroom so that all of your students have the tools they need to be successful with the task and the targets that they will attack later throughout that module. In Unit 2, they are beginning to extend that learning, and this is building on the content and going deeper into that topic, pulling in a research component or looking at the topic from a different lens. And then in Unit 3, your students are taking all of this expertise they now have on this topic, and they're using that to formulate a writing piece. And this will be considered their final performance task for that module, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Next slide, please. Here you'll see the topics in middle school grades. Special attention especially was given to the selection of topics, choosing those that would be really compelling for adolescents, but also representative of diverse perspectives and using text with diverse characters and written by diverse authors. The next, please. It is important to note that assessments and a performance task are included for every unit in the grade. Again, this is going from K to 8, keeping that consistent structure. These assessments are on demand. They're also formative assessments that you'll do on a daily basis. And the assessments are tied to the reading, writing, listening, and speaking standards. The assessments are designed and the question types are designed to be developmentally appropriate and then also align with the types of questions students will see on high stakes or end of year assessments. Next slide. Here's an example of a mid and end of unit assessment, and I apologize, I know it's difficult to read on the slide, but the mid-unit assessment has a focus on reading comprehension. For example, in grade 6, your students would be tackling new myths in the study of mythology. The end of unit assessments have a stronger focus on writing, and your students are completing essays and narratives. And then the EL education, just as a side note of that, will explicitly teach all of the writing and the strategies for students to collaborate around that writing process. There is explicit and consistent writing instruction using the painted essay structure, and that uses color to help students visualize the parts of essays and organize their information. Next slide. Okay, I mentioned a moment ago, this is one of my favorite components of the curriculum, that every module ends with a culminating performance task. And this is that high quality work dimension of student achievement coming to life in the curriculum. Throughout Unit 3 of every module, the performance task is a scaffolded project that students produce, and they come up with this high quality piece of work that shows off their literacy skills and their content knowledge at the end of a module. This is a deeply dedicated project that we see students and teachers really dive into. And at the end of this, we have seen teachers do beautiful celebrations of their students' work. And you can invite in students from other grade levels. You can invite in family members and community members, and students have the chance to show off their hard work and to be honored and celebrated for the work that they've accomplished. Thank you. The EL approach to teaching and learning is truly grounded in respect for teachers and school leaders as creative agents in their classroom. This is a curriculum that was written by teachers for teachers, and the result is a curriculum where learning is active and challenging and meaningful, but it's also public and it's very collaborative. We believe that students can become experts to do good. So the curriculum and the professional learning combined equip teachers to challenge students to take responsibility for their learning and to share that with others and to apply the learning to make a difference in the world. Next slide. To give you an idea of what some of the lesson supports look like, we're going to pop into the teacher materials now. So all of the work students are doing is led by the guiding questions for the module. And these are questions that are designed to help students to, understand the so what behind their instruction, as well as ground the work they're doing with the text and the conversations. Next slide, please. The module at a glance summaries provide essentially the gist of the modules and the units. And these include a number of the number of lessons and the assessment structure that you'll come into contact with throughout the module. It's a quick snapshot into the module to really provide teachers with an overview of what the 9 weeks of instruction will look like, how it will unfold, and to provide an understanding of how the weeks and the units and the lessons all build upon each other. The organization and cohesiveness of the modules and the units are very intentional, and they are designed to help students build on their learning and draw conclusions between the task and the titles that they're working with. So the 4 T's, topic, task, targets, and text, is the framework that drove the design of the module. They are highly interactive and interrelated, and they really work together at every level of the lesson as a whole, as a module, as a unit, and even for discrete lessons where they're really building upon one another and creating this cycle of learning. As an example of how all this fits together, students begin grade 6, module 1, unit 1 by reading The Lightning Thief. They analyze how the author develops the point of view from the narrator, and then they strategize to determine the meanings of unfamiliar words and phrases, including figurative language. In the second half of unit 1, students prepare for a Socratic seminar discussion by analyzing how Percy responds to new challenges. They create discussion norms to have productive text-based discourse about the novel. And then the theme is also introduced in the second half of this unit to help prepare for unit 2. The performance task at the end of the module, again, is going to be heavily scaffolded and collaborative, and it's going to tie directly back to that guiding question. And so in this example, students are going to be asked to write a scene from The Lightning Thief from a new character or a new perspective. And they're going to pull in all of the work and unpack the text, showing an understanding of point of view and tying in their knowledge of Greek mythology. Okay, lastly, I'd like to touch on the support for diverse learner needs. EL education provides numerous ways to ensure that all learners are set up to meet grade level standards. EL strongly believes that rather than lowering expectations for students, it's important to hold all students to the same standards and instead provide support for our students to help them achieve those standards. In addition to providing materials for students who need additional supports throughout the lesson, EL education has also provided ideas and strategies to support students who are ready to extend their learning and take on additional challenges. The next slide, please. There you go. So to help explain this concept, I wanted to take a moment to look at the materials that exist for each module. In particular, I want to draw your attention to the yellow book on the right side of the screen here. Although labeled the Teacher's Guide for ELL Students, this is a specific guide that provides lighter and heavier supports that are very lesson specific, and they can be applied and helpful for all of your students. Next. So taking a look inside of this book, you can see that there are various strategies that can be incorporated at the unit level. And then also this resource can be used to support language dives. Let's see, there we go. Language dives that are strategically embedded in the curriculum. And this is just one of the strategies to help students. But a language dive empowers students to analyze, to understand, and to use the language of academic sentences, which can often seem really complicated and opaque for students. So during a language dive, students will slow down, or the class rather, will slow down for about 10 minutes to have a conversation about the meaning, the purpose, and the structure of a compelling sentence from a text. It could also be from the learning target, it could be from a checklist, or it could be from a rubric included in the curriculum. Then following this deconstruct, reconstruct practice of a language dive, students start to play with small chunks of sentences. They start to interpret them a little bit differently, they start to rearrange them, and then they start to be able to apply that to the language in their own lives. So really playing with language and in a way that allows it to be tangible for students. So here's an example of another support strategy throughout the curriculum, and this is done through a note catcher. One idea of supporting students would be to offer a partially completed version of the note catcher to students who just need more examples. You could add additional framing to this or sentence starters just to help kind of move along with a particular activity. And then lastly, I'll touch on conversation cues. And this is another strategy aimed at providing support. They are questions that teachers can ask students to promote productive and equitable conversation. And it's all based upon these 4 goals you see listed here. So the first goal is to encourage all students to talk and to be understood. Goal 2, listen carefully to one another and seek understanding. And then goal 3, deepen that thinking. And goal 4, think with others to expand the conversation. So across the year, conversation cues are introduced 1 goal at a time, and they slowly build the capacity for all of your students to begin engaging in that rich collaborative discussion that's targeted at the standards and helps to level that playing field and establish equity in your classroom. This practice provides ample opportunity for productive and equitable conversation, and it makes it an important part of the process of acquiring literacy skills for any student. For English language learners especially, we have seen this process really critical to their overall language development and acquisition. Lastly, conversation cues aim to ensure that equitable conversation, and it gradually builds students' capacity to become productive and collaborative participants. Goal 1 focuses on the fundamentals of encouraging students to talk and to be understood, and then goals 2 through 4 really take students to deeper levels of conversation, from listening to each other and to deepening their thinking, to thinking with others. I know I talked a lot and threw a lot at you. I'm happy to take any questions that I can. And then I know these materials are also available on the RPS website. So if you wanted to dig into any of these teacher materials a little bit more deeply, you'll be able to see what they look like.
Thank you, Ginger. I don't see any questions in the chat box. And so I think we can go on into math. Thank you so much, ladies.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Cassandra.
Thank you so much, Ebony and Dr. Neighbors. Good morning, everyone. I'm Cassandra Bell, Coordinator of Mathematics, and I would like to introduce you to my fantastic math team. Pamela Kuther is our secondary math specialist, as well as Linda Terry, and my elementary instructional specialists are Samara Booker and Natalie Davis-Waller. We also have joining us today our wonderful partners from Great Minds, Jessica Trahan, who is the Regional Sales Director, as well as Nadine Multa Ali, who is our Implementation Specialist. So I will hand it on over to Jessica at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassandra, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As mentioned, my name is Jessica Trahan, and I'm the Regional Sales Director here for the Mid-Atlantic. I'm located just down the road in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I taught mathematics using our math curriculum for about 7 years with the Project Lift Schools. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Great Minds and how we have written the Eureka Math Virginia edition specifically for the state of Virginia. So I want to start broad and discuss by some of the things that you will see embedded right into the curriculum that was already in our highly ranked Eureka Math curriculum. Our mission here at Great Minds is that every child is capable of greatness, and it's our job to help teachers and students achieve that. So our curriculum is founded on high expectations for all students and teachers. So often we went into math classrooms and we heard, I'm not a math person. I'm not a math person. Well, it's because historically math was taught as rote memorization. And then came the tricky era where they just decided to make math fun, which also led to poor results. So what we discovered is that students weren't graduating high school because they weren't passing algebra. So Eureka Math aims to set students up all the way from grades K to 8 at a very early age to be successful in higher education, careers, and life. We have written this curriculum with lessons aligned to the Virginia SOL standards. We also support the Virginia instructional shifts, looking at focus and coherence, usability, and rigor in mathematical practices. We know that a knowledge-rich curriculum helps all students understand the why behind mathematics, not just the how. We don't want to teach kids just to follow a certain steps to solve a problem. We agree that students need to learn a set of rules or procedures, but in some cases that might not be the best tool for their job. And in most instances, students need options, really just more tools in their toolbox. One of Eureka's hallmarks is its emphasis on deep knowledge building, ensuring that students have an understanding of the math conceptually. You will see this as we focus deeply on problem solving, communication, reasoning, making connections, and using models and representations. These models are used all the way from grades K to 8. While I know we're specifically discussing grades 6 to 8 today, you will have that confidence to know that your K to 5 students were exposed to these same models and routines growing from year to year across both the grade band and vertically. The curriculum was written for teachers, by teachers, and is educative for teachers. One of our hallmarks is that we wrote math in a story that develops. So we start with the story of units in K to 5, and then in middle school, we are moving into the story of ratios. So just as events in a story takes place for a specific reason and in a specific order, so does mathematics. So we wanted to take your Virginia standards of learnings and embed them into this story. So it's not just teach this standard, check, move on, teach this standard, check, move on. You will see this strategic use of layering these in a thought out and research-based progression across both the grade level and the grade bands. So those are just some of the ways that Eureka Math is coherent. We have some deep dives that we'll go into in just a moment, but the first thing I wanted to discuss was rigor. So what's rigor? Why do we care about it? We're really trying to achieve a deep conceptual understanding of key concepts to know how math is a body of knowledge, and it's not just a discrete set of skills. But that being said, we also have to achieve procedural fluency, which is speed and accuracy, and with equal intensity, exposure to real-world application. So just as you can see on this stool, we need to have each of these components. Without the conceptual understanding, without the fluency, and without the application, the stool won't stand straight. Eureka, again, gets highest marks for rigor, but I just want to stop and focus for that on a moment in the sense that other curricula lay the entire burden of building this on the teacher. So we say, yes, we have green marks across the board, we do rigor successfully, but we deeply went into each of these components. And so you'll see that as we dive throughout this next few lesson walkthroughs. Here's an example from grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8. As those slowly come up, you will see where we have embedded those Virginia SOL checklists. While we know that this is just a checklist, as we continue to flesh out these lessons, we will continue to provide a deeper scope and sequence for each of these components to ensure that you can identify where those SOLs are addressed. So the curriculum structure remains the same from grades K to 8. We start with a module. It could be anywhere from 6 to 8 modules per grade, depending on the grade. But the module is going to be a broad overview, working towards that major work. Modules are then broken into topics. Topics are then broken into lessons. You'll see this same structure set up throughout the entire course of the curriculum to ensure that students have a layered approach with multiple opportunities of success. Once again, we're not just teaching a standard check and moving on, but ensuring that those deep mathematical practices are embedded throughout the course of the entire module. In grades 6 through 12, we have 4 different lesson types: problem set, Socratic, exploration, and modeling. I believe we'll dive deeply into these in just a couple slides, but you can see brief descriptions on the screen. Your problem set will be the majority of your lessons, especially in grades 6 and 7. Students and teachers will work together through examples, and they'll complete exercises to reinforce a concept. Now, just as you heard Ginger discuss with ELA, we want students to become fluent in mathematics. So these Socratic lessons, you might think Socratic in math, why are we doing that? But we want students to delve into conversation. We want them to become fluent in having conversations around mathematics. We also have exploration lessons. These could be independent or small group work, but it really dives in to a challenging problem. We want to start the lesson and let students have an inquiry-based dive into how to solve these problems. And then of last, modeling. Students will practice all or part of the modeling cycle with real world and mathematical problems. I think there's about 1 per module in grades 6 and 7, and then maybe about 2 or 3 per module in grade 8. These are really here to set students up for the type of math that they might experience in grades 9 through 12.
So this is just a visual of the proposed math block. Eureka lessons are structured for 45-minute class periods. Our math block is 55 minutes. The components of the Richmond math lesson, or excuse me, Eureka math lessons are the same. They start with fluency and number sense routines, then jump into conceptual development, which is the instructional focus of the lesson and the bulk of the instructional block. And as Jessica was just talking about, those lesson types are built into the concept development. So that may be a problem set, a Socratic, an exploration, or exploratory challenge, or modeling structure. And then students engage in the closing or the debrief, and that's an opportunity for students to articulate their understanding one last time of the lessons that were taught, and another opportunity for teachers to redirect students with any misconceptions that they may have before they jump into that formative assessment at the end of each lesson in the exit ticket.
So we go through a 3-step process when how we suggest to prepare for a lesson. So we are never going to be a ship it and forget it type of publisher. We want to ensure that your teachers have that support both built into their teacher editions, but throughout the curriculum. The 3-step process is suggested for how to prepare for a lesson. It's understood that at times teachers may need to make adjustments or customizations to lessons to fit those time constraints or any unique needs of their students. The recommended planning process is outlined here on your screen. We want students to discern the plot, or excuse me, the teacher to prepare to discern the plot. Look at that table of contents, read the topic overview, review the assessments. So often I feel like when I was teaching, I'd open the curriculum, I'd skip all the stuff at the beginning, and I would start with lesson 1 and just go in and read from lesson 1. We don't want to do that with Eureka Math. We want to have teachers begin with discerning the plot and goals. And then find the ladder. We'll look at the ladder in just a moment, but the ladder of step 2 is really just a metaphor for the teaching sequence. This sequence can not only be seen at the macro level in the role that this lesson plays in the overall story, but also at the lesson level, where each rung of the ladder represents the next step in understanding the next skill needed to reach the objective. So as I mentioned, it's that layered approach to teaching that curriculum. To reach the objective or the top of the ladder, all students must be able to access the first rung and each successive rung. I know Cassandra mentioned the exit tickets, another great place to ensure we're on track with learning. We never want to do an exit ticket just to assess. Eureka Math assessments aren't written to assess, but more so to guide instruction to ensure that we are targeting that next day's instruction. So as we're moving through that ladder, we're analyzing, we're writing notes, we're anticipating where students might struggle the next day. We're really allowing the craft of teaching to come to life here. And then, of course, step 3, hone the lesson. We want to identify the areas that need to be customized. We don't want you to open a Eureka Math and say, this teacher edition, it's just a script. That's not the intention. We want you to be able to hone that lesson and identify areas to customize based on needs for your students. One of the hallmarks about the Eureka Math curriculum is that we wanted to embed differentiation and scaffold right into the DNA of the curriculum. Here's some of the ways that we did this. I can promise after your first year of teaching, you're going to look back and say, wow, they did do all of those components. But I know that it's a tough process to trust at the beginning. So you will see that our references will tell you exactly where you can make scaffolds, exactly where there might be differentiation, and exactly where there might be suggestions based on the UDL scaffolds. But here's some other ways. So not only do we have explicit and systematic instruction, we also move students from the concrete to the pictorial to the abstract across all grades. Now, doesn't mean it's a one-way track. It means we can move back and forth from concrete to pictorial, but sometimes students might need to go back to that concrete, and that's just fine. We want to make sure that students have the objects in hand that are appropriate for their learning. You'll also see that we have high leverage transferable models. These models are used across a variety of grades. So not every year are they getting a new model they have to memorize or a new tip and trick that needs to be memorized. We front load academic vocabulary just as you would see students do in a pull-out session. I know we discussed on that discourse just a little bit, but at the end of every lesson, we deeply dive into conversation around the day's lesson. So often I feel like you look at the clock, it's 11:17. Oh my gosh, it's lunchtime, close your books, we have to go. We don't want that to be the case. And so often the discourse conversation is cut out, where this is an opportunity for students to learn from each other. I could explain something till I'm blue in the face. Another student could explain it, and another kid could say, whoa, I got that. That makes more sense. So those simple to complex sequence are brought in through the models as well as through the actual structure of the curriculum. And then, of course, as mentioned, those explicitly identified UDL boxes. So here's that ladder that we talked about during step 2. We want to make math accessible for all students. You'll see 2 of the specific callouts on the page. As you look through your teacher edition, these will be identified in green. This gives us ways to extend for students that might need extension, as well as to support students that might be English language learners or students with disabilities. These were all built on the Universal Design for Learning and offer multiple entry points for students. So looking at this Eureka Math lesson, I know I touched on this for just a moment, but on the right-hand side, you'll see those 4 lesson description types. Within each lesson, you will see the student outcome with lesson notes as your opening piece. Really important for us to have an understanding of how to teach the lesson. We need to know what the outcomes should be at the end. So we always start with student outcomes in grades 6, 7, 8. Then we move into classwork. This could be the Socratic, exploratory, modeling, or problem set. Closing, conversation, discussion, and then exit ticket. And here we will walk you through a sample Eureka Math lesson. Now I know this is very small, but it's just provided so that you can note a couple things. First, in the top left corner, you'll see a piece of paper and a little pencil icon. This is telling us that this is a problem set lesson. So students and teachers will be working together in a small group to solve some specific exercises. This page is specifically from the teacher edition. You'll see some writing in blue and some writing in that tannish brown. What is in the boxes, like you'll identify on the bottom left corner, is what the students will see in their student edition. What's identified in blue is our Eureka Blue to provide teacher guidance, sample student responses, and what you might expect to come out of conversations between you and your students. So often we look at curriculum and it says, explain to your students that the place value on the left is 10 times the place value on the right. It's a pretty big concept that's left up to every teacher in the district to determine, well, how do I explain that? So all of these descriptions are built right in here to make for an equitable education experience from the teacher standpoint. So as we continue to move through, you will see we are working through exercises, both with examples, as well as with the Eureka Blue, providing teacher guidance. One of the things you'll note is there are some red keys on here. These are where we need to finish doing some graphic organization as we are continuing to flesh out the Virginia version. These are actually pages from the drafts of the Virginia version. And then we continue to move through those independent exercises and then moving into exit ticket. Now, support. We know that support is huge, not just for teachers, but also for parents. So we'll have free resources, including your resource pack, any sort of standard alignment study, math community nights. We've seen a lot of districts we've worked with do some really cool parent math nights. So you'll see outlines for those. We have Teach Eureka videos, which is almost 24 hours of on-demand professional development videos that are provided for the teachers, written directly by the writers of the curriculum. And then of course, parents, we can't leave them out. We know we're going to hear, what is this new math? So we want to make sure that we include parent tip sheets and homework helpers. And I think I got through that in my time speed talking.
You did. Thank you so much. I don't see any questions in the chat, but we do have time remaining in our session. So if folks want to just add in some comments or some questions in the chat, or if you just want to unmute yourself and ask questions for ELA or for math, please feel free to do so.
We would love any questions that you have. We want this to really be a conversation.
Hi, I'm not sure if you guys had already answered this question and I missed it, but I wanted to know when we will be able to see see versions of what the Virginia aligned sheets look like. Like you said, the other version was really small, and so I wanted to know when we will be able to actually see what those activities or alignment will look like.
Yeah.
Hi, Miss Newkirk.
I am Miss Newkirk. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead, Jessica, if you want to answer that, and I can explain some other details as well.
Yeah, so one of the things that you'll notice is that pedagogy between Eureka Math is going to really still be deep Eureka Math pedagogy. So if you're used to that curriculum, a lot of those components will be the same. With addition of lessons, I believe there's about 30 to 40 lessons being added at each grade level throughout the course of those modules. So where they'll specifically be, I cannot necessarily speak to, but we do have a timeline for release. And Autumn, I believe, can share that. I know our timeline for when we're giving that to your curriculum and instruction team, but I'm not sure how that will be distributed amongst everybody else. So I'll let Autumn run point on that.
Sure. Well, first, we need the curriculum to be adopted. So we're not sharing those things out until after, ideally, that gets approved on Monday at the board meeting. In addition, we will have different checkpoints, meaning that once a batch is complete. So one of the things through our conversation is we didn't want, and we knew we wouldn't fit into what Eureka and the original design and why we like Eureka Math to begin with, if it was added just at the end, or if it wasn't thoughtfully embedded into the story of math for each of those grade levels. So that takes time. And so through this partnership, we know we're going to have to give some time and a little bit of grace. But what we have is set some really clear deadlines for a deadline for that to be completed, like batch 1. It's about a quarter. And so then we will have the opportunity to review that. And people like you, Ms. Newkirk, who've been part of our coach work and our curriculum writing will have a chance. We're going to have a designated individuals in RPS to do a review. And then those will then go to production. They'll be put on the platform. So we will have access electronically, and then they'll be go to print, so that way the teachers get the printed copies and then the student copies. So that will go into 4 different dates throughout the year, but all of those will be at least it's about 6 to 8 weeks before the teaching of that batch. Does that make sense?
It does. Sounds good. Thank you so very much.
Sure. And the other thing we are working to have, and this is something that we've requested, is then that scope, like a scope and sequence to see it all.
Right. Okay.
And they've yeah. And we know that's important for the year, just to have that year scope, but then each of the batches will be done way in advance. And I know that was a challenge, and why teachers are asking that now, because that's something we could have provided last year. Absolutely. When we only received approval to move forward with, the Richmond Math, which was a version of Eureka Math. We didn't get that approval till middle of August. Right. Everything was running to get it printed, running to get it aligned. We were running. Okay. And we're excited that we won't be running this year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions? Great question. Thanks, Ms. Newkirk. Well, we are recording this. And so we are going to be able to, we're going to edit it as far as make sure that our openings and our closings are all cleaned up, and we're going to put this then on our curriculum adoption page. If you haven't checked out, RVA Schools /curriculum-adoption has all the resources that we've been sharing, where it puts slide decks. It takes, we add those every day. We're trying to add something else on there that someone say, hey, do you have this? Do you have that? We do have the alignment document up there, a checklist that might be helpful as far as alignment, if people have interest in that, but for both math and ELA. But if there are no other questions, we'll make sure that we get this presentation uploaded onto the website. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to myself, to Ebony, Cassandra, anyone on their teams. And we look forward to hopefully moving forward with this next week and getting started with some professional learning.